right. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be talking about planning with a purpose, and I'm joined today by CEO of Lattitude, Pete Schramm. Pete, thanks for coming.
Hey Megan, hey everybody. Happy 2025. Happy halfway through the first month already. Wow, that's nuts. And happy National Mentoring Month to everybody.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was National Mentoring Month. It just kind of fell that way, didn't it?
Well, it happens every year, but it's like Christmas, right? Or your anniversary. You kind of get in trouble if you're like, "Oh, this one popped up on me." So for us, it's big on a lot of the work that we do, and it's something that's really important, right? Building up others and bettering the lives of others.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for those that don't know, Pete at Latitude and Life Force Wellness are close partners. We do a lot of different programming together. Pete, I absolutely love what you have built with your building your board of personal advisors and even what you do with career mapping. And so I thought it was just a great message that I wanted to get out to the rest of our network and share a little bit of that. First and foremost, let's start with your book. Like, tell us a little
Yeah.
bit. You launched this book. I absolutely love it. I have my signed copy here, but if you wouldn't mind, share that with everyone else and how you came up with this, passion to really write this book.
Yeah, well, it all started from the farm, right? I'll give you that piece. So I'm a farm boy through and through, grew up in Butler, Pennsylvania. I think we have a couple of Butler County folks on the call, some familiar names, some new names. But the book is Pathfinders, Navigating Your Career Map with a Personal Board of Advisors. And throughout my life, I was always in sponge mode, if you will. So trying to figure out what else is out there. I'm always driven towards challenge and opportunity. Those are the two big drivers for me. So how can I keep pushing myself out of my comfort zone, and how can I find opportunities to grow and to help others, really? And so along the way, I kept learning more and more things, right? Asking people, hey, how'd you get to where you are today? What would you like to do differently? Hey, would you mind, if I bounced a couple of ideas off of you, Megan, for example, right? And throughout this piece, then people started coming to me for advice. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Then people started asking me to speak. I'm like, this is even more interesting. And after about 60 or 70 of those speaking engagements, individuals said, hey, we'd like a little bit more around what you're talking about. Mentorship's helpful. This way of, bringing in multiple mentors with the PBA, Personal Board of Advisors, is extremely interesting. But how do we do that? And so I initially said, well, I'll give you another couple of worksheets, or I could come back and speak again. And between the individuals and our team at Latitude saying, Pete, you have to write a book. So oddly enough, some of you may have heard this, but the first 40 pages of the book, first draft, not the final draft, got written at 3 a.m. on June 23rd. So it was one of those things where I just kind of sat up in bed and said, okay, drawing the line in the sand, here we go. But it's really breaking down the who, what, when, where, why, how of building up that support system. We'll talk a little bit about a couple of those board seats today whenever it comes to planning and some of the goal setting pieces. And we'll talk a little bit about one of the five dimensions of the career map. But I'm really proud of it. I can put the link to the book in the chat here. I think we shared it beforehand, but that's been the big impetus of it. And exciting news, I'm working on a second edition of the book. So there's a couple of things that I want to tweak. So if anybody else has gone through it and you have some thoughts or ideas or maybe a story that you want to share, and then I'll be recording the Audible version pretty soon as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's start with that. So, we're here to talk about planning. And I know we're at that time of year where it's the New Year's resolutions and it's no longer cool to have a resolution. Everyone kind of drops that. But I think it's still important that we approach the new year and we attack it with some kind of plan into place. And, really focusing like with us at Life Force Wellness, we have those 7 areas of health and well-being and setting a goal in each one. And what I love is that you add that career aspect. I don't have that with all of my clients. Some of my clients are retired or they're stay-at-home moms, and so they're not thinking about that. But really, I see the importance of setting good goals. And I always have preached, and learned SMART goals. I think most people know SMART goals, but I've recently heard you talk more on SMART T goals, where there's this additional why. And I'd love for you to just like dive into that a little bit and how you approach that goal setting.
Yeah, so most of us have heard of SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. But the why, because I don't like to, just be simple or mundane with anything. We have to try and innovate a little bit, right? So the why is all about you, yours, making sure this is something that aligns with your career map, making sure this is something that is applicable to you. And let's look at it from five different phases of life. I like threes and fives. So we have pre-career. So thinking about these concepts for anybody that's maybe in high school or college, right? Some of those pre-career folks, we might be able to share some of these planning with a purpose concepts to them. Early career, right? Folks that are in the first 3 to 5 years of their professional journey. That could be right out of high school, that could be right out of college. Thinking about mid-career, right? Those folks that are 5 to 20-ish years of experience. Late career, right? 20 plus years of experience and still working. And then post-career. And post-career could be in a professional sabbatical, right? Maybe I'm stepping away from the workforce for a little bit, or maybe I have taken that step to retire, but how can we still plan with a purpose and have our journey documented and visualized in a way that we're able to share it with others? Because the cool thing is, every single one of us has lived experiences that somebody else here can benefit from. And so that's the really cool piece of what we're talking about. But the why aspect, to go back to your point there, Megan, is really breaking it down. So if we think about it from an early career or pre-career professional, you might not really know what your goals could be. So you might start off with, hey, Alice, how'd you get to where you are today? What are some of your goals? And I may just copy and paste a goal from Alice or Beth or Anne, but I want to make sure that I edit it. Right. And that's the piece where a lot of us fall short. Well, just because so and so is doing this, I'm going to do that same thing. Is that actually applicable to me? And then let's look at it from kind of a mid-career or late career. A lot of times in a corporate setting, we're told what our goals are for the year, and that typically feeds into our annual performance review. Hopefully, those performance reviews are more than annual now. But think about how you might break it down one step further. And I'm not necessarily saying ask the five whys, right? The Lean Six Sigma approach to it, but really figuring out, okay, if there is something around cost, technical, schedule, revenue, for example, how does that impact me, right? What actions can I take specifically, and how does this fit into my overall goals? And what you might find through this process is, wow, I'm planning to do this thing, but I don't actually need to. So it's kind of like a check yourself opportunity.
Yeah, and I love that because that blends so perfectly with what I teach on burnout. Because I teach that there are four things that cause us to become imbalanced. And one of those is just incongruence, that our beliefs and our actions are not aligned. So, typically with I work with personal clients, they'll say things to me like, "Oh, I wish I could better my relationship with my friends." But then when their friends call them up and say, "Hey, we're heading out for the night, you want to come?" They go, "No," and they sit at home and watch Netflix. And there could be a deeper meaning there with, maybe they're facing imposter syndrome or that friends group they're trying to fit in and they don't have that sense of belonging, like Brene Brown talks about. But the other thing is, either public stigmas, meaning I'm doing this because I'm told this is what I'm supposed to do. And I think a lot of people, especially early in their career, this is just what they're supposed to do. You're supposed to go to college and you're supposed to get a job and you're supposed to climb up the corporate ladder to manager, executive. And there's not a strong why behind it. They're just doing it because that's what kind of society is telling them, or maybe their boss, or maybe they have kind of a faux mentor, which is something we see where somebody kind of like mentors you, but it's not necessarily for the right reasons. And we can talk more on that later. Or it's like a an internal stigma, like, they're going for these big things, but they're not looking at those other portions of the SMART goal. Like they're not making sure that they're specific. They're not making sure that they're attainable for their current skill level. And so they're kind of like reaching for the moon, but they don't have the tools to get there. And so that causes them to burn out. And I think diving into that why part that you've added really helps us from hitting those blocks and getting into burnout because without that piece, I think it's so easy to spin your wheels and burn out. And then we wonder why, employees are leaving the workforce in droves. If this is one of those things that we're not addressing as managers or leaders or just internally for ourselves, of course we're going to burn out and try to look for greener pastures, so to speak.
Yeah, you talk about the why, and it's interesting because you have why from Smarty, but you also have the WHY, right? And Simon Sinek's start with why piece. And I think there's a lot of analogy between those two, right? Making sure it's applicable to you, but making sure it's aligned with you and your purpose. And, beginning of the year is a great time to do one of those ikigai, activities. I think you just posted about it in the last few days, Megan. But really thinking everybody, actually, this is kind of a cool one. If you're by the chat on here, if you can just put into the chat like a yes or a no if you've heard of ikigai before. And Megan can talk about it from her perspective. But I really look at this of, just a short exercise, get a piece of paper in front of you and ask yourself the kind of four questions, right? What do I love doing? What am I good at doing? What does the world need? And what can I get paid for? And ideally, those things align with what you're doing professionally and what you're doing day in and day out. I got a couple of no's on here as direct messages, Megan. So maybe just hit it from your perspective. What's the ikigai to you?
Yeah, so I teach in my life forces, there's always this deeper health, and one of them is existential. And for me, I think a lot of people immediately hear existential well-being and they think it has to be religious or spiritual. And while I personally am, I know I work with a lot of clients who aren't. And so this idea of ikigai is a Japanese concept, and it basically means your reason for being. And so that's how I present it. We call it our purpose well-being. And that is what gets you out of bed in the morning, what drives you. Because if you don't have a purpose, you would just lay in bed all day and waste your life. And so it's asking yourself four questions. And those four questions are like, what do you love? So, what are the things that you really have in your heart for that you just love doing? And then the next question would be like, what are you good at? And those skills. And usually those two kind of fuel each other. So, what you're good at, you tend to repeat and you develop those skills. Well, where you love and what you're good at intersect, that is your passion. So that's not your purpose in life, that's your passion. That's something you have a passion for. Then you can throw in okay, well, what does the world need? And I mean, look around. I mean, so many things are broken. The world is in need of a lot of things. Well, if we look at, what does the world actually need and what do you love? That's your mission. So think of like missionaries. You may not make a lot of money doing it. You may not have all the skills you need, but you're really on fire for it and it's needed. And the last piece of Ikigai is what can you get paid to do? So you have to find something that plays in all four areas in order for it to be kind of your purpose or your reason for being in that driver. And that can be really hard. So the exercise is going through and listing out everything that you love, everything that you see that the world needs, all the things you can get paid for, all the skills that you have that you're good at, and where all four of those intersect, that's where you can find your purpose. And like I said, some of those overlapping sections, like what you're good at, what you can be paid for, that could be a profession. And I see that. And one of the reasons I brought you on is because I think a lot of people get stuck in profession and vocation. And vocation is what does the world need and what can I get paid for? And I think
Yep.
there's a lot of young people that get pushed into, oh, don't study that. There's no money to be made there. So go do this. Like we hear a lot too with parents now pushing their kids into trade. Hey, all these baby boomers are exiting and there's going to be needs for mechanics and electricians and plumbers, and it's not glamorous, but it pays really well and it's really needed. And so then you get a lot of people in careers that they have no love for and maybe they have no skill for that they can build over time. So it's not really their purpose and they're not connecting and they're not engaging, or they find something that they're good at, like I'm good at this and I can make money doing it, but there's no love for it, or maybe it's not necessarily something the world needs. And so it's a profession and you can see how when we leave one of those pieces out, it doesn't lead to full fulfillment. You
Yep.
really need all four. And so taking the time to do this exercise, I think is great. And there's a lot of research, like good, solid research by the NIH and other reputable organizations on how Ikigai can lead to not only improved engagement, but longevity in life and, lesser health issues and less disease and less depression. And in a time when mental health and loneliness and those kind of things are seeping into our culture, and we're seeing them on the rise, I think promoting these ideas of ikigai is really helpful for a lot of people and organizations. They should have this as part of their, planning sessions for the year, even like looking at the who are we as a company, as a company, as a body, what do we love? What is the need we're trying to fulfill? Where can we make that money? And then what are we good at as a whole? Based on the people we have on staff now, what are we good at? What do we love? What is our really looking at your mission from a different angle.
I think it might be a good opportunity to transition a little bit into the career map and some of the PBA so that we can build on this, right? So the career map piece, everybody, think about this as a way for us to, okay, now we have our Ikigai, we've answered some of those four questions. Now, how can we start to think about, okay, let's look at where I've been, where I'm at, and where I want to go. How do I make sure that each of those where I want to goes aligns with this. So again, the five pieces, right? We have the job, role, position is column one on the career map. Again, past, present, future. Column two is on the skills. Three is on education and certs. Four is on the achievements and accomplishments, and five is on some of that fun stuff and something that the outside of work things. And let's really talk about that column five piece and where the role of the accountability partner on our personal board comes in. Megan, we've done some of this together, right? For example, one of the column five items for me in 2024 was, hey, I gotta lose some weight, right? My clothes are not fitting, Megan. And you're like, well, yeah, I could have told you that. I see you often, and you're just getting bigger, big, right? Out of love, right? But that's the piece of whenever you have that solid accountability partner, you build that trust, respect, and you set those expectations early on, right? I set the goal, right? SMARTY. And I said, "Hey, Megan, you're allowed to be tough on me as we're going through it." I think there's one person in the waiting room, Megan. But the piece of building that initial foundation so that if I veer off of what I said I was going to do, you're able to kind of like shake me a little bit and say, "Hey, come back to reality, pal. This is what you said. You committed to this. What's going on?" And so, especially for that role on the PBA of the accountability partner, you might have it, somebody that's on a fitness side of things, right? You might have it for somebody that's on a business growth perspective. One of the other things that we've done is around some of the marketing and some of the things on social. And we've gone through phases where we're even before this call, right? Hey, where are you spending some of your time? Well, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Do you need to, right? Is that valuable? And so sometimes we can utilize the addition by subtraction mentality. And that's something we can talk about in a little bit with some of the year in review. But if you want to share kind of your take, anything on that bit of the career map and some of the board seats as well.
Yeah, and I think that you kind of hit it with one, having an accountability partner that's willing to be real with you. And that takes building that trust because you're not going to get anywhere if everyone's constantly sugarcoating everything. I think that this also requires you to develop a bit of a growth mindset. I think a lot of people don't take that criticism really well. And so, it takes that building that trust and building yourself up at the same time, making sure that you have that growth mindset that you can take those criticisms, and then also building those areas of trust that they can have the hard conversations. I was so thankful that when I was in the oil and gas field industry, I had a VP kind of take me under her wing when I first got into like a management role. And it was really hard to transition from like, okay, I'm in the trenches with everyone and now I'm their manager. and like putting on the manager hat and being like, oh, I'm in charge now. I have to be like the adult in the room now. That transition was really hard and I was so thankful. But there was a lot of days she came to me and she's like, you're messing this up. You shouldn't be doing this. This is totally wrong. And it would be very easy if I had a very fixed mindset to just get mad and like angry and be like, oh, screw this place or get in that fight or flight, mentality. But I think that we need to have a certain sense of humility. And also, like, I also trust in her that she's telling me these things because she wants me to succeed. And I think that's so important. And I don't think you're going to be successful. I wouldn't be where I am in my career now if it weren't for having people, which is why I love your whole concept of that personal board of advisors. Another thing I teach, and I think when you and I first met, I was speaking at a conference on scarf model.
Yep.
And the R in scarf is all about relatedness. It's those social stress triggers. And I talked about how our brain is wired to be part of a community or part of a tribe. And then I think like 2 hours later, I was sitting in your breakout on this building that board of advisors. I'm like, oh, this is so I teach why it's important to have a tribe, and you teach like how to build the tribe. And these things just go so well. And so I love how you have kind of set out like these are the key people that you should have around you. And if you could go over maybe those top like 3 to 5 seats that we should be looking to fill in our lives so that we can be successful.
Yeah, the other one I read a book over the break, three books actually. One of the goals for this year is 20 books.
Me
So to
too.
consume more knowledge, I'm almost done with my third one. But the front runner so far to recommend is The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. He talks about belonging cues. So the whole book is worth reading. I'm a big fan of Audible, so I can listen to them. But that's one that I went and bought as well. And even if you want to just Sparks Notes it, there's, Google Culture Code, Daniel Coyle, um, summary, right? And there's a good piece in there around belonging cues. So that's something for all of us to look at whenever it comes to some of the board seats that we can initially fill. There's 10 that I talk about in the book, but we'll just kind of give this starting point, right? So typically whenever people come into an organization, there's some kind of a buddy program. Right. Hey, they're going to show you the facility. They're going to show you the different places virtually where you go to get things done. Just kind of show you the ropes, right? What it's like to be here. This is the most informal board seat that you have, typically within 1 to 3 years of experience of you. The second board seat is typically your supervisor, right? Most of us have somebody who we're reporting to, somebody that's doing our time card, right? Approving that. Maybe we're doing our annual review with them as well. So that's the second board seat. And then you can think about the third one of a functional mentor. This is somebody who potentially worked for your supervisor before, ideally had your specific job in the past. Maybe they're 5 to 10 years of experience ahead of you. Note that I'm talking about years of experience, not age, because there's plenty of times where people on my board have been younger age-wise than me, but they're more experience-wise in certain areas. And that's the cool piece of bringing diversity of thought, insight, perspective, lived experiences to our professional development journey with this idea of a personal board of advisors. And I just want to do a quick caveat. I didn't come up with this idea of a personal board of advisors, right? It's, over 100 years old. I think I talk about that on page 3 of the book, right in the introduction. Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, he talked about that, 100 years ago, right? But nobody's really broken down the ideas of, okay, what do these different board seats look like? And then the fourth one I might just touch on, Megan, is that accountability partner, right? We alluded to that a little bit, in some of what we talked about previously here.
Yeah. And I also love the mentor piece too. I think that a lot of people use mentor and coach interchangeably, and
Mhm.
that's not correct. A coach, I'm a coach. You're a client. We have a business transactional relationship. I am here for you for as long as you are paying me. Not to say that I don't care, not to say that, I won't still reach out or connect with you. I make great relationships with my clients, but a mentor is somebody who you really bond with A lot of times mentors are not being paid. They are doing this as volunteer. They take you as an apprentice under their wing and they build you up. And I think that, understanding that, on your board, you've kind of got both a coach and a mentor, and they're
Yep.
not really interchangeable. And I think those are two really important pieces. Now, sometimes I also think your coach can be your accountability partner too. I think that's where it can be that I feel like as a coach, a lot of times that's what I'm doing is keeping them accountable. And I love that there's so many different ways to build that board. There's no one right way. Am I correct? Like there's no one right way to make a board, but the ones that you listed are kind of those key places that you should have.
Yeah, the whenever I was in Hong Kong, I ran past this statue of Bruce Lee, over time I started to research a little bit of okay, who the heck was this guy, and what was he all about? We've talked about this quite a few times, but a big takeaway for me was his quote, right? And you're probably at a point where you can say it with me, Megan, right? But it's absorb what is useful, discard what is not, and add what is uniquely your own. So I give a framework and a guiding point to some of these different board seats and the folks to surround yourself with. But you might say, "Hey, Pete, this is all fine and dandy." And here's a prime example, right? In the book, I have an infographic of some of the circles of different phases of your professional journey, and the bigger circles are where you would spend more time with each of those board seats. And so you might spend more time with a buddy or a functional mentor or your supervisor earlier in your career. Whereas later in your career, you're probably going to spend more time with your coach, your ally, your successor, right? Those kinds of things. And an executive recently said, "No way, you're wrong. I want to spend a bunch more time with my buddy. I want to have a couple of buddies on my personal board, and I'm, 35 years experience." And I was like, "Cool." I didn't say the person was wrong. I said, "That's great fit for you, right? Add what is uniquely your own. Discard what is not." And so that's the piece of just saying, hey, maybe you're going to have one board seat repeated a couple of times. Now, I'm going to push back a little bit on the piece that you said of the coach also the same name being a coach and an accountability partner. I'm going to challenge each person to try and fill each board seat with a different name. You might have, coach one, coach two, coach three, but see if you're able to have different names for those ones, right? Because, we think about risk and opportunity management. That was one of my jobs before I went full-time entrepreneur and startup phase. But we think about single points of failure. So if we have even just 6 board seats, right? I'm going to try and push it to get to 8. But say we have 6 and one of those persons is in two of those board seats. That's 33% of our board that leaves if that person goes away. Right. So just thinking about it from that regard, and we can do another session where we get into the life cycle of the personal board, right? Hire, retire, fire, right? And we get into that piece. But I also want to touch on the part of mentor, sponsor, coach. So a lot of us have heard of mentorship, a lot of us have heard of coaching. Not as many of us have heard of sponsorship. And I'm actually gonna revamp this in the second edition and change it from sponsor to advocate. Because I think there's a lot of negative connotation, right? Hey, I'm a sponsor for this event. That usually is dollars, right? And sometimes it's giving a golden ticket to somebody. But sponsorship and advocacy is really of giving of my brand for somebody else, right? Putting my name on the line, and whereas mentorship is giving of my time and my insight, right? Maybe some mentors might be a connector, but that advocate role, that board seat, is really on super connector, bringing you into rooms that you're not into, sharing your name and building you up. So think about, and then the sponsor and the mentor, those are both non-paid positions where a coach typically is a paid position. So I just wanted to talk about those three differences there. And there's oh, son of a gun, I can't think of her name right now, but somebody who writes a lot about that at Carnegie Mellon. Oh my goodness, I'll have to find her name and get back to you on that one. But there's a lot of research around those 2 or 3 pieces coming together.
That's awesome. And that's the thing too, is that nothing is set in stone. Even
Hmm.
with like, I think a lot of people even think with going back to what we were talking about with Ikigai, like, oh, once I find my purpose in life, this is my purpose in life. And no, because your skills change over time. What you love may change over time. You know, the world is going to need different things at different times. So, like, making sure that you're able to like flow. Going to like what you were saying with Bruce Lee, he also had a talk where he talked about like, you should be like water. You know, when water enters a cup, it becomes the cup. When it enters a teapot, it becomes the teapot. You know, be like water, be able to flow and transform and change, you know, be able to be open to making those changes. And I definitely think that when it comes to planning and goal setting, so you set the goal. I definitely think that next step is find the people that are going to help you get to the goal. And then next is, okay, now how are we going to get to that goal? And like developing that game plan. And I know for professionals, you've developed this career mapping and it's a great visualization. Could you share with people like what you've done with mapping out career? Because I think a lot of people just go aimlessly, like, oh, this promotion's open. I'll try for it. Or, hey, I really like doing this. So I think I'll go over there. But I love how you sit people down. You go, no, let's really plan this out and visualize where you want to go so that you can make the right steps so you don't end up 20 years down the road in a job that you hate.
Yeah, I think we can also talk a little bit about vision boards, right? And the power of documenting it. And whenever I put pen to paper, or if you use the Latitude software, right, you're putting your career map on to something digital so that others can see it, is absolutely huge. So it becomes a little bit more real. And, I'm an engineer, undergrad and grad school. So I look at things from the other perspective of, man, that just sounds fluffy, right? Do I need to write it down? The answer is yes, right? It really helps to do those things. So Megan, you'll be happy to hear that I've put together my first ever vision board this year. Yep, yep, yep. And I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the how we might do some of these things. We talked a little bit about the Mel Robbins recap and looking forward. I think you've done some of this with your planning and some of the clients and customers and partners as well. But I'd like to hear if anybody on the call has done just kind of a yes, no in the chat. Have you done a year in review where you look back at the last 6 or 12 months in order to set yourself up for planning for the next 6 to 12 months? And so, as you're putting some of those pieces in there, I'll give a couple of these ideas. Again, it's building off of some of the concepts from Mel Robbins. I didn't read her new book. I think it's called Let Them, but it's, big, big, big seller. And I think it is most driven towards kind of women in their mid career journey. But some of the things to think about, whether you've done it or not, it's either a refresher, or it's like, oh, that's kind of a cool thing. She's on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Spotify, so you can go check out all those different things. Yeah, there you go. But just a couple of the steps to hit on. I won't touch on all of them, but just to go through this thing that is around us all the time, right? Our cell phone. And what does it have on the back of it? Right inside is a camera, right? So just go back through and look at the pictures, the photos you took in 2024. It's easy to search, filter, scroll. For me, I think it was like 9,000 photos. So it took me a little bit longer to get through all of those items. But that's one, is to just go through your photos and see what moments and memories and things were you capturing. Also look at your screenshots, right? What were you screenshotting? I think that's a cool build on it idea. But then also look at your calendar. I'm big on my calendar, so you can go back and see, where was I spending my time? So looking at where was my time taken up, where was my mind taken up? Because if I'm gonna take an action and pull this thing out of my pocket or purse, right, and take a picture to capture this memory, gosh, there had to be some reason that that was special to me. So looking back at the highlights is one piece there. The next part is to kind of look at the lows, right? What were some of the hardest points in your year last year? What did I learn about myself, right? What were some of those friction points? And one of those things, Megan, that we talk about often in our, kind of self-development, hard love chats is kind of what do we need to let go of, right? I've been doing something. Do I need to keep doing that? What is something that I'm spending a lot of time on, but it really sucks more energy out of me than I'm able to put into it? Do I need to delegate that? Ought I, just stop doing that? And that gets into the next piece of I like to talk about it's great for any feedback conversations, but it's also good for personal self-reflection. Start, stop, continue, shift, right? And this is the piece of what should I start doing this year? What should I stop doing this year? What should I continue doing this year? And what should I maybe keep doing it, but shift my approach to it as well? And I think a final piece on here, and again, everybody can do their own, is what did I get to, or what did I not get to? But I kind of had it on my vision board for last year. Do I need to keep striving for that? That goes back into the goals and thinking about it from a Smarty perspective. And one of the things I'd like you to touch on, Megan, is the winning, right? Let's celebrate those wins. And something that I've been playing around with is if we get a little bit of a group together, this might be a soft launch, but mostly a feedback for it is, it's a little cheesy, but this idea of yinspiration, right? So a lot of us are in the Pittsburgh area, yins, Y-I-N-Z. It gives you a little bit of cringe anytime you say that word. But it's this, and I haven't really heard the word said, or I Googled it. Nobody's really coined it yet, but yinspiration. So if anybody here takes it, I'm going to be kind of frustrated with you. But it's this idea of, if you can build on it, Megan, but celebrating, right? This group that's like, hey, you got to win. Let's just share it. And it's not, toxic positivity. It's not this empty gratitude, but it's this piece of we're all winning together. And that part of you are, the sum of the five people you surround yourself with. People want to be around winners. And it's a way for, okay, that win over there, maybe that's something that I did, and I can celebrate that. So it's a way for all of us are going up our different mountains and on our own paths, pun intended. But it's a way for us to say, wow, I am doing a lot of good things because I'm definitely at fault for not spending enough time. So Megan, if you want to dive a little bit deeper into that celebration piece, and if there's anything else that you like to do on that recap of the year before in order to plan going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I always love to sit down with my clients at the end of the year, whether it's in December or January, and go, okay, open up your calendars. Let's look, January, how would you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10? What was the high? What was the low? What was the challenge? What did you learn? What did you achieve? And we go through month by month and we can see, okay, so how are we going to attack this year differently? And maybe it's something with business, maybe it's something with the family. I feel like we all kind of have certain months that blow up. For me personally, my family, all of our birthdays are like between April and June. So it's like every weekend there is a birthday, there's Mother's Day, there's Father's Day, there's something, there's a graduation. It's just pure chaos from like April 15th to like June 15th. And so, looking at those challenges, okay, what did we do well? How did we plan these? What was the challenge? How can I better prepare for it for this year? Because I know it's coming again. Really is helpful. But to your point, the big thing that I always emphasize is let's look at the wins because we have a very strong negativity bias. And even on a daily basis, one of the exercises I run with some of my mindset coaching clients is at the end of every day before you go to bed, rather than writing down what you're grateful for, write down 3 things that went well. What were your 3 wins today? Because it is so easy for us, especially as we're winding down at the end of the night, to go, oh my gosh, I didn't get this done. And I forgot to send that email. And oh, I needed to do this laundry. Oh, I forgot to do that. And I know I didn't get to that. And I didn't get to the gym. And it's just all the things you didn't do. And it's negative, negative, negative. And it builds up that anxiety and that stress. And then we wonder, why aren't we sleeping well at night? And we're tossing and turning. So instead, before you go to bed, write down what are the 3 things that I accomplished today that I can be proud of. And they don't have to be huge. It could be like, I did the laundry, I cooked a healthy meal at home versus ordering a pizza, whatever it is, write down those successes, celebrate them a little before you go to bed.
Yep.
And what's really interesting is with my clients is I'll have them do this for 3 or 4 weeks. And then we sit down, we look at their journal and go, what are the themes? And we start to see, oh, I'm really good at doing this, or I'm noticing that I'm solving a lot of these problems, or I'm having a lot of these wins. And now we can kind of fill in that icky guy part on what are you good at? What are the wins we're constantly having? Maybe it's, oh, I helped a coworker, and that keeps coming up over and over again that, hey, you're somebody that's reliable for this at work, or you're really good at getting this done. So it really does help, and it overcomes that negativity. You're shifting that brain, that mindset from focusing on the negative to focusing on the positive. One exercise I run with my family is we have a gratitude jar. And every time something good happens, we write it on a slip of paper and we put it in the jar. So, like, we're in potty training with a 3-year-old. Like, she used the potty all day, no accidents. That goes in the jar with the date. We visited the zoo. We closed a big deal with a client. Whatever it is, we're putting those in. And then what I like to do is on New Year's Eve, we dump out the jar and we read all those slips of papers and we just celebrate all those wins that we had and enter the new year with that positivity and going like, okay, how many more slips can we add to this jar next year? Like, how can we make this better? What are the things we really enjoyed that maybe we want to repeat next year or build on for next year? I think that's so important because we get in our heads so much. And I think a lot of us too, what I like about the way that you plan this out and you attack this in the way that Mel Robbins even explains it, I'm a big fan of Mel Robbins, is, I think a lot of people get hung up in the details. As an entrepreneur, it's very easy for me to go, okay, what were our KPIs? What were our goals? What were our dollars? How many followers do we have on social media? Like, and get so like hung up in the details of things that we do lose picture that bigger why. We start to disconnect from our mission over time. So I think revisiting this, not only as an individual, but as an organization, can keep you well connected to that mission and that why and keep you making sure you're on the right path.
One of the things that I've learned through the Pittsburgh Human Resources Association is a lot more on strengths finders, right? And what's that really focus on is building on the good. And I think tap that nail on the head or whatever, saying you want to do, but let's build on the good stuff. And what we're doing is ending the day, ending the night. I wrote that one down. I love that idea of the gratitude jar. And it's another cool, healthy thing to do on a New Year's Eve celebration, right? To look back at, where was I spending my time? And so maybe I took a picture, maybe I had a meeting or an event or a calendar thing about it, but this is where it goes even further. And I'm proud of this, right? I documented it in the moment. Does it have to be every day? No. That's the other piece is you guys might say, hey, you're throwing a bunch of stuff at us. Okay, cool. Maybe just pick like one thing, put it on your calendar 2 weeks from now and say, hey, am I doing this? And then find another thing that we talked about today and put it on your calendar as just a hold, right? It's easy to put whatever title you want in there, like 3 weeks or 4 weeks after that, and say, hey, can I implement this now? And then if there's a third thing that you picked out of the session today, maybe put that on your calendar at the end of February, right? Or middle of March and say, hey, is it a good time for me to build on this? And so what you're doing there is you're putting together a little bit more of your own, growth journey, right? And it does, and the first one, right? Anytime I'm reading these books, I come up with all these ideas and like, okay, we got to do this stuff with the team, this. And I'm like, no, we can't overwhelm ourselves. We can't overwhelm the team with all this. So I'll actually go onto my calendar and I have something that's coming next week, right? I'm going to share this activity with the team. There's another one 4 weeks after that where it's, hey guys, let's test drive this as a group here, but it's just little piece, little piece, little piece. And that's where that engineering background really is helpful. We're building a strong foundation and we're going to iterate, right? And we ask ourselves this and for individuals, but also from a business lens of the start, stop, continue, shift. And I like to time box those things. Hey, let's try this for 2 months, right? And if we really give it our all and we feel that this is helpful, then we'll continue, right? So it's that piece of I have a couple of experiments going and we're able to absorb what is useful, discard what is not. And oftentimes the team says, okay, we like this, but let's shift the way we're doing it a little bit to make it uniquely our own. I'm like, yeah, you're exactly right. So I think it's that piece of just adding small bits consistently.
And even to that point, one of the things that I've really taken to doing the last probably 4 years now is picking a word for the year. I don't know if anyone else does this. I would love put it in the chat. It's going for some reason all the chat is just going to direct message to us, but we are seeing it. So go ahead. I would love to hear like what is your word for the year? Like for me last year my word was refocus. I was like you, Pete. I read these books and I get so excited. And I'm like, oh, I got to add this and I got to make a program around that. And I want to teach this and I want to get that message out. And I like now I've got a catalog of over like 40 workshops and it's overwhelming. And so last year was all about like refocus. Like let's narrow it down. So my word last year was refocus. And so anytime I get that itch to like get off of the path that I had set for myself, it was no, the word is focus. We're refocusing. This is the mission. Not to say we can't grow, not to say that things can't shift and goals can't change, but I think it's so easy to like get lost in the noise. And so this year, my word, now that I'm refocused, my word is intentional. And so I'm originally I had the word as selective, and I was like, I don't like the ring of that. It seems really negative, but it is intentional. And going back to something you said earlier, I think the hardest thing with those 7 steps that Mel Robbins is letting go of certain things. And that's where I am. And one of the pieces that really stuck out to me was the intentional. Where am I spending my time? Where am I spending my money? Where am I spending my resources? And I've actually backed off of some things that I was really in love with, but it wasn't anything I was getting paid for. And it wasn't really something I felt like was needed. And so there were a couple of organizations or groups or volunteer opportunities that I was heavily involved with in the last year. And I just went, you know what, this isn't filling all the right gaps. And so I have to let it go. And it's like they're things I loved, but you have to recognize when it is time to let those go. There's a time when you can give more, and there's a time when you need to scale back and protect yourself. And so
Yeah.
my word for this year is really intentional. And not to say that I'm like, oh no, I'm not going to help you but like I'm looking at the bigger picture and I have a mission. Like I have clearly defined my mission. There are certain messages I want to get out. You'll see this with keynote speaking and the posts I'm putting out. There are certain things I'm really in love with. It's something I feel like the world really needs. It's something I know I can get paid for so I can continue to
Yeah.
feed my family. And it's something I'm good at. And so it's like that's where my focus is. And I'm going to be really intentional about fulfilling that purpose. And if it's not aligned with that, I have to let it go. And that can be really hard. And I think that's where having a good accountability partner, somebody that's going to talk truth to you, somebody that's going to ask you, like, hey, is this in alignment with your purpose? Is this in alignment with your goals? Is this really something you should be taking on? We don't always like to hear that. But it's important to have that person in your life to help you refocus. We
Yeah.
got reinvent is one of the words. I like that one.
Yep. Yep. So just reading through some of the ones that have come in here, esteem, balance, scale. Some of the ones that I've had are balance, growth. You can think about these things for one word that's personal and professional. And I think for this year, my word's going to be consistent or consistency, right? So that I'm continuing to take those steps towards balance, toward growth. But it's those small things, those good habits that I'm going to build on each month and be consistent towards it, consistently checking myself before I wreck myself, saying no, right? The addition by subtraction, like you alluded to. And I think that's another thing that I need to thank Megan for in this public forum of, helping challenge me of do I need to continue doing that, right? For example, right, I grew to 44,000 followers on LinkedIn. The number goes up and down over time, but it's one of those pieces of during this phase of my life and my journey, do I need to be spending hour and a half to 3 hours a day on that platform? And have we, successfully closed B2B deals on LinkedIn? Yeah, we have. So it does work, it does grow. But it's one of those things, and I think we can think about this from our career map overall is what phase of life am I in? Am I working to live or living to work? And that's something that, really can resonate, right? Which of those career phases, pre-career, early career, mid-career, late career, post-career, and we can think about it from that lens as well. and looking at it, do I need to spend some more time with my family? Is that, priority 1A? Do I need to put in a little bit more time at work or on this project? Is that becoming a 1A.1 or 1B? Or is that 1A for a little bit where a very close second is family? Is it my health, right? And just I did successfully lose 60 pounds last year. I gained a fair amount of it back over the holiday break, but the pieces that we so back to that consistent part, right? To do those things. So I think it's that part of doing those pieces. And then also think about as you accomplish these goals, Dan, our sales coach, right? He said, "Hey, how are you going to reward yourself? Is that I'm going to, treat myself to a cup of coffee, once I do this piece. I have an Apple Watch, right? That was a goal I had actually during COVID. I said, hey, I'm gonna do this, and once I do, then I'm gonna get myself an Apple Watch, right? Maybe it's a trip, maybe it's a time to just set aside a half day, right? Whether you have to put in some vacation and just do nothing, or go be a tourist in your own town. That's something that's kind of fun to do. Or you're gonna go out and spend some money and go to a new restaurant. There's plenty of food influencers out there. I'm getting more into cooking this year. So if anybody has fun recipes that you want to share, I'm working on a lot more of that piece, and it's fun and it's something that's different and it breaks up the day. Still coaching basketball, still doing other things, but the cooking is kind of a fun one for me. And I've always cooked, but it's, diving a little bit deeper into that. So, Megan, I know we only have a couple more minutes here. What else do you want to cover with the group?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, of course, I got some recipe books for you. You and I can connect on that later.
Yeah.
I want to address some of the comments, and I'd like to open it up for anyone that has any questions. So if you have a question, you can unmute, turn your camera on. You're welcome to do that, or you can put it here in the chat. I want to address Beth. I am totally with you. I am a huge fan of VIA strengths. That's one that I learned about with my positive psychology practitioner certification. I think it's free. So if you're somebody who is trying to find your strengths, I love that tool and I think it's free. It's VIA Strengths. I don't think it gets enough attention. I think a lot of people go to Gallup Strength Finder. It's really expensive. I think you can do an online free assessment, but VIA Strengths, I really like them. The other one for employers, I'm a huge fan of Predictive Index. I that one I just feel has a little bit more options. It's not like, oh, you fit in these four quadrants. And so I think it gets a little more deeper into the, like really where people land. So VIA, I'm a fan. And then for organizations, that predictive index, I'm a big fan. And I love
Real
your
quick
word. Okay.
on that one. So we're actually with Latitude rolling out. We have the organizational engagement survey, we have the mentor match survey, but we're rolling out two more, right? The 360 assessment and the self-assessment rooted in the Big Five. So stay tuned, everybody, if you're excited about that kind of a concept coming in the very near future from Latitude. So building on what you said there.
Yeah. And I love your word for reinvent. And Anne is somebody that I've connected with through, I tried a new networking group last year and met some new and fun people. Anne's my drinking buddy at all these events. She has a great idea of starting this like late bloomer society, people that maybe switch careers halfway through or change, because I think there's so many of us out there that, we didn't have the career mapping and the accountability partners, and we followed a path. And now here we are, and we're going like, oh, I'm 30 plus, 35 plus years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, and I'm going to switch careers. I'm going to go do something totally different. There's so many people that are doing that. I think that is something you can go for. And you and Pete should definitely connect, because I think he could even connect you with some people that would be into that.
Thank you. Appreciate that call out, Megan. I really do. Yeah, yeah, whether it's planned, unplanned, or you're coming back into the workforce, just the world changes on a daily basis and what's out there. So just trying to take advantage of some of that and then build up that network so you don't have to feel like you're facing everything alone.
Yeah. And then Bruce, your word flow, I think that is such an appropriate word for you with everything that you have been through. For those that don't know Bruce Hall, he is not a Pittsburgh native, so Yins might be a little new to him, but he and I did an Ask the Expert on burnout and work-life balance when he was kind of going through a difficult time. And I know it's been an interesting, stressful, tumultuous year for you, Bruce, but I love following your stuff on social media, and I think your word flow is fantastic. I think that's a great way to put it. And I think that's something everyone should keep in mind, whether we were talking Ikigai, your career map, your board of advisors, those can be changing. I don't recommend changing them too frequently. You got to set a goal. You got to go for it. You got to work for success. You can't let setbacks sink in that failure and then throw something away. But you do need to be open that when you develop new skills to push yourself, maybe adjust that goal a little further, or as you get new people into your network, that might change what you're capable of or open you up to new ideas and opportunities. I think just being open is really good. I'm trying to see if there was anything else. Free mentor, Martha Stewart cooking. Oh, there you go, Pete. That one's for you.
Nice.
MarthaStewart.com. Cooking plus life learning ideas. So Martha's still out there. She's still cooking with Snoop Dogg. I want to know. I want to do a cooking with Snoop and Martha. That needs to happen.
That would be cool.
All right. So just wrapping up, if no one has any other questions or anything else they want to share, first, Pete, how can they find you? If you want to put your email and stuff in the chat, if you want to share maybe even how people, where they can follow you, where they can find you, if they have any questions on your book, career mapping, building that board of advisors, how can we get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I put my LinkedIn to the chat a little bit earlier. I'll add it in again here as well with a little bit more information. So best place is LinkedIn. There's a link to the book and then the company website. We just updated the video on the homepage, so it'll show you a little bit more about the capabilities around the surveys, career map, and mentorship. And then also have to give a shout out to a class that Megan and I are teaching for some Gen Z up and coming leaders at Duquesne University. So in collaboration with them on April 3 and 4. It's an all day Thursday, all day Friday session. And I sweet talked Megan into doing this with me because I think one, she's awesome at what she does. And I think whenever you have two people like this doing a session, you get way more than just one plus one. So if you know any Gen Z leaders, rock stars, male, female, April 3 and 4, and you can reach out to either of us to get some more information. But that's on site at Duquesne, April 3 and 4.
All right. And then I'm also putting in the chat, our next event with Life Force Wellness is our webinar. So every month we host an Ask the Expert on a different topic. So we'll be announcing that a little later this month. And then we offer a webinar. Now that webinar is free for any of our elite members. So if you are a member on our app, it's like $54.99 a month. You get everything our app has to offer, the mindfulness, nutrition guidance, workouts, community, challenges. But you also get access to a group coaching call and then a monthly webinar. And those topics change month to month. We kind of have a theme for each month. And this month is all about, setting those goals and finding that balance. So our webinar this month is Harmony Within. So if you feel like finding balance in your life is just not going to happen, or you want to dive more into the mindset of what are those 4 mindsets that hold you back, we're going to dive really deep into that in this 1 hour live webinar. And that's coming up in, I believe, 2 weeks. I should know this. So that one is set for January 29th at 1 p.m. If you sign up now, there is a discount. First 10 people that sign up, there is a discount. Otherwise, pay if you're an elite member. We did post it in our app today. So if you go into the app, go under your elite group, the promo code so you can get free access is in there. If you are not an elite member, it's usually $35. But like I said, first 10 people to sign up will get a discount. So if you want to take advantage of that, I'd say do it now because those dues tend to fill up a little quickly. Yeah, with that, I want to thank everyone for coming. Pete, I want to thank you so much for your time. Everyone should definitely check out your book. I think it was really well done. I'm looking forward to the second edition, and we look forward to maybe having you all back next month.